Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.
Hello and welcome to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast hosted by myself, Greg Oram, and my podcast partner, Richard Spray. Joining us on the panel today, we welcome the Statman Danscape, Raf the Random Pundit. Coming up, we're going to take a deep dive in Forest's defensive unit and analyse their stats as a group and individuals across the last season and how they improved massively on the previous year. And then, just for fun, we will propose one or two possible new recruits that might fit into what we think would suit Forest's style of play in the forthcoming campaign. So who has caught our eye and who do we want to see wearing the Garibaldi next season? Who indeed? They want to know.
Oh, still going. That's brilliant. Nicholas Zalewski with a wonderful individual goal in the 90th minute.
With Williams outside it. Here is Nico Williams. Hits the byline. Low ball pulled across back post. Oh, yeah! And Forest are in front. 37 minutes. It's Aina arriving late into the penalty area.
Bola cruzada, segunda trave, Wanderson dominou, bateu! Gol da máquina do líder! É do Grêmio!
Boom. There we go. How are we doing? Welcome. Richard Spray, how are we doing?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm looking forward to this. This gets right into my little love for scouting and looking at players and figuring out who we might want to bring in and all that nonsense that no one really cares about except for me. It seems like sometimes. But no, I'm good. I'm doing really good, man. I'm glad to see you guys again.
Yeah, no, it's great to see you too, buddy. I was thinking, what is the episode about today? It's about the who's, the whys, the wheres, who we might sign, but also who we've got in our defensive unit and who's performed well and who hasn't. I think by and large, everyone did. And, it was a great season, as we all know. Danscape, I know you've been working really hard as ever. You are the stat man, of course, and we've got that coming up very, very soon. But I hope you're not too weary from all that pie chart work you've been doing, mate.
I am. I'm a bit graphed out after this. It's my idea, but there you go. I get right into the weeds with it and try and work out the best way of doing it. But, I enjoy it. So hopefully everyone else will once we get it up.
And, well, listen, we certainly hope we will get it up. And don't forget, of course, we got Raf with us as ever to contribute in his wonderful way as ever with his eye on the finances. Now, our resident finance guru, of course, has the spreadsheet ready to hand. So we'll be leaning in on Raf's expertise, won't we, sir?
Oh gosh, yeah. This is so cool. One, I'm full of Nando's, fresh like right now, so I'm buzzing. But also, you can see the buzz and Rich jumping around. We're all kind of hit our happy place in these episodes at the moment. Rich gets to do his scouting, Dan gets to do his stats, I get to do my finance. We're all just like in our happy corner contributing in, and hopefully it's a melting pot to make everyone kind of see what comes into the mixture, and everyone hopefully gets to learn something and learn something new today, or a new perspective to kind of feel.
Exactly. I'm glad that you three get to do what you're good at. You
got your sound stuff.
I just get to do loads of innuendos.
Yeah.
Okay. Enough of that. If you are with us, welcome along on X and on YouTube. We hope that you will like and subscribe and join in all the fun by commenting. Please do drop your comments in and let us know that you are here. We hope that you'll follow us on X, on TikTok, on Instagram, Facebook, and all the other places that are out there. I think you might find us. Maybe we might even have an old. What was it? What was the first one called before Facebook? iSpace. That was it. Oh, those were the days. A good old iSpace. Yeah, we're on iSpace as well, somewhere. Anyway, right. We are going to kick things off. Strap yourselves in. Here we go.
I'm a stat man.
Moraes fazendo som, fazendo som. Pedrinha Moraes fazendo som, fazendo som. E Pedrinha Moraes fazendo som.
So the stat man's going to lead us through a whole PowerPoint presentation. Before he does that, I want to say to Dr. Anna, who set her alarm so she didn't miss this one. It's great to see you as well, Dr. Anna. And Forrest over on X says you should do a space, guys. Is that a live on X or something? Yeah, Spaces, isn't it? We could do that maybe. And Sherlock Holmes is with us. He's loving the PSR work from Raf and everybody else. Good to have you on board, Martin. Thank you very much. Okay, Danscape, the deep dive. Here we go.
Yeah, so sort of splitting the team up into the areas of the pitch that we can kind of focus on. And I suppose, everyone knows that our defence had a good season, obviously much improved on where we were. It was just to really then put that into perspective and see how it compared to other seasons for us, other seasons for other teams, and then focusing a bit on the players. So going through it, I suppose just in the outline, we went from being the 77th best defence in the Big Five leagues in Europe last season. We were the 28th best defence across all those leagues. So we've moved up 50 odd places there, which has bumped us up nicely. And there's some other stats there in terms of sort of how much defending we've had to do this year. And you can actually see in the chart on the right that in some areas we did more defending last year in terms of we did more blocks and more tackles and more interceptions, which shows that whilst our defensive unit was strong, obviously as a team, we've managed to keep teams at bay so we don't have to do as much of that. We've had a bit more of the ball. We've managed to retain the ball a little bit more. I know our possession is still the lowest in the league, but in terms of dangerous areas, we've managed to keep teams away a little bit so that some of those stats are actually reduced down. Second most clearances across all of Europe for Forest. I can't remember who was number one now because I did this a little while ago, but that's not a bad going. And the only one on the chart that sort of throws up a bit of a red flag is that 51st for errors leading to shots, which I think a lot of that came in those last 8 games of the season, didn't it? Really, up until then, we were really good on that stat, and then it just seemed like we saved all our bad decisions to the end of the season, unfortunately. So yeah, unless there's any questions on that, it's just a bit of an overview, really.
No, I don't know if you're just going to come on to it in the next slide or not, but the one big metric we all knew about from the end of the second season was the set piece frailty and defending set pieces as well. And we know that changed massively in this last season we've just finished, and we were top of the charts at defending set pieces for a good while. I'm not quite sure we finished. I think we might finish in the 4th or 5th place. Is that something you've measured as well?
It's not, no. I'll be honest. What I've tried to do is not just re-quote all the stuff we already know. There's been so much discussion on what we've been good at, and certainly within the Premier League context. I've tried to make it a little bit wider and go a little bit deeper behind that because I think there's been so many stats shared, that we all know in terms of dual rates and things like that for players. So it's just trying to look at different things. But obviously the set pieces was massive. You guys said it at the start of the season, how many points it would make a difference of if it's just those goals that we avoided. And when you look at the chart on the right there, the green line for this season, the one area it stands out is the goals conceded, even though the rest of our defensive work is very similar. So it could be as simple as, the difference between this season and last season is the set pieces in terms of how much work our defenders have had to do.
Yeah. And Dan, it's really interesting just there, you talk about set pieces. Actually, our aerials 1 hasn't massively changed. And you would think that's a really key, important part of set pieces, but that hasn't. So again, the two things that are the question marks: is it that X factor of Milenkovic and his organization, which is an intangible potentially on this chart, which has done something, but also that midfield giving us way more protection, like you alluded to? Is that the Anderson factor that's come in, that's been kind of a large element, which helps out the defense as well? Potentially, I don't know.
Yep, yeah. I think good points there. Okay, next slide.
So I just ranked our season defensively in the scheme of all Forest seasons in the top flight here, and you can see it comes in at 15th place this particular season. Nuno surrounded by a sea of Brian Clough seasons, who was clearly a defensive master and had some top defensive players for him there, because he's dominates this chart for us. Frank Clark up in sixth place, managed to just maintain a slightly better defensive record across that season in 94-95. But yeah, that's where it kind of ranks in our history. So a top 20 position for Nuno there, which is not bad going. And then this is how we ranked as a team across the Premier League, across a number of metrics. So I won't go into all of them, but you can see the Forest logo is high up on this chart for things like save percentage, the number of defensive actions we've had to do. Errors we're quite high in the Premier League on. And I suppose the only couple of areas where we drop down the chart is the expected goals against and the shots on target against, which hints towards the fact that we were a little bit looser than we thought, and maybe Matt Sells was one of the big reasons that our defensive stats changed this season to last, as well as set pieces. And then I suppose the one that's interesting is that press intensity column, the third one from the right there, where we are the second least pressing side high up the pitch in the league, and yet we've still obviously come away with a decent defensive record. So just in terms of style, very different from other teams as you go up that chart, like for example Bournemouth and Brighton, that go about their defensive work in a different way. But other than that, a good chart for us. Top 4 in a lot of metrics there.
Excellent. Shots on target against.
Yeah, so this is just the split of the season. So although we've had this a good defensive season, I think it's interesting to note that there was a massive change at some point after the Bournemouth game, or before the Bournemouth game, I suppose you could say, because we conceded 5 in that particular game. But this is how we rank in the league as you go through the season for the number of shots on target we've allowed against us. And you can see nice green line, sort of top 4, 5 on that chart until you get to that Bournemouth game. And then all of a sudden we just never recovered our kind of defensive unit to stop teams being able to get their shots on target. And we ended the season down in 12th place for that particular stat. So certainly one that stands out as being like, obviously, if we'd have just been able to turn that around a little bit towards the end of the season, who knows what might have happened for us. But interesting to get thoughts on what did change between that first half and second half of the season.
The Bournemouth game came after Christmas. Is that right? If I remember rightly, or did it come? I can't remember now. Was it before Christmas?
Yeah, good shout. I'll research that while you carry on.
Yeah, no, because I saw last season as, oh God, this is such a stupid thing to say, very much a game of two halves. It's very much a season of two halves. That first half was, as everyone knows, magnificent, and the metrics on your chart show that. And there was that tail off. So, I mean, what about you, Richard? Do you think that could the Bournemouth game have been a turning point? Milenkovic came in and made a massive difference to our defensive unit, but something definitely dropped off. What was it?
Well, there's a couple of things. The first thing was, I think you alluded to this, the Southampton match, that second half, especially towards the latter part of that second half, just felt like that maybe was a tipping point too. I think you've quoted too, Greg, saying the Wolves match felt like we got away with. Yeah, the Wolves match was like we got away with quite a bit in that. And there's some metrics going forward on this as well that talks about. What was it? There's some metrics, and it's not coming to my mind immediately, but it's the idea that we were probably, let's say, lucky, but somewhat blessed to a degree in some matches where things didn't get executed in a way that they normally have in areas like this of the season, where we were kind of giving up these opportunities and it just sort of didn't get converted. Whereas it seemed like every error, I think I've mentioned this before, every error that we seem to incur towards the latter part of the match, especially in some of those home matches where I think we only lost 4 out of the last 5 home matches, just seemed to go in. I don't know if we can attribute it to some sort of fatigue. You had Ola Aina out for a period of time as well. You had, some outlier things there, but yeah, I don't know, man. It just feels like it has a lot to do when we get to the stat around number of minutes played by that back line. That had to have been a contributing factor, because these are professional footballers and they're well conditioned. But at some point, when you're being utilized as much as you are, and I think Dan's got a stat surrounding how many players we played in defense, it shows how few players we played. And so in my mind, I think it's the pressure of the Champions League coupled with potentially just the fatigue factor.
And I was thinking as well, Raf, I don't know what you think, but first half, everyone's fresh. the first team are outperforming their metrics from the season before. And maybe it highlights just how important the January window really is when you want to get those reinforcements in. Even if you don't necessarily feel like you need reinforcements, it kind of almost highlights that our squad that we had put together at the start of the season was built for a 12th to 13th place finish at best. And that outperformance got us really high up. And so therefore, when it kind of tailed off, it was a mix of not having the reinforcements in January, and the ones that we did have just weren't good enough to come in because the amount of rotation was quite low, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword, though. And a lot of people are like kind of jump on the club made a massive own goal, not signing people in January. But change is a difficult thing. Halfway through a season, players come in without a pre-season. There's a plan. How long does it take them to get up to the plan? So it can actually cause disruption. But at the same time, we're going to come on to the use of players and how much fatigue there is within the players. There's a really good point, which is to say, when this season first started, if this line was 12th the entire time, and we'd spent the whole time kind of mid-table, we would have been super chuffed with that, actually. And I think it's just a case in football. These are seriously elite athletes. If you're off it by about 3%, that is the difference between being in a tackle perfectly and being half a foot outside of it and probably getting a yellow card. And if the whole team is fatigued increasingly as it goes on, you just see those few percentages which can turn the dial. But I don't think this is not criminal. We're holding our players to an outrageous standard for what the expectations and what the money we outlaid for these players was. We're not spending 60, 70 million quid on each player that's coming in like the rest of the players, that the teams that were above us when we were sitting third, fourth. Those top teams and the teams around us are all spending massively on players. We weren't. So I'm not one to really go hard on the players. I think that they did exceptionally well this season. And even what we see as a red line is 12th, which actually in the grand scheme of things is not so bad. That's
where we thought we'd be potentially. Alex talking about the drop-off happening after Dubai. That felt like a bit of a turning point. It's almost, I think I said it in the season as well. It's almost like everyone was like knee deep in dirt. They were going through the mill. They were in the moment. They were on the battlefield. It's like, if you give them a shower and a wash down, you're washing away all that hard work, and they're almost coming out too fresh for the next game. It's like you kind of almost want to keep them in the zone. Don't take them to Dubai and give them nice massages and hot weather. It's like Rocky Balboa training. You want Rocky Balboa training. You don't want Ivan Drago training. You want Rocky Balboa training. You want it to be in the med, chasing the chickens. There we go.
Well, that was coming right off the the Brighton win too, wasn't it?
It was, exactly. Way NFFC, thank you very much for the £5 donation. He says, Forest are the first team in Premier League history to double its points tally from one season to the next. Yes, that's true. Bring it on next season, up the Reds. Absolutely, Mark. We absolutely agree with you. And the red side of the Trent did their charity match over at Ilkeston today. So I hope that went down really well. We'll hopefully see some pictures. And Adam Wicklow, as we talked about previously, his wife is Emma, isn't it? I think she has been quite poorly. So we support her, we support him. And we did, as Tricky Fred says, we sent over a cheese hamper. So the cheese hampers from the Cheese Trader, they are lovely. So if you didn't see the picture on Twitter, go and find it. Gives you an idea about what that cheese really looks like. Anyway, let's move on. Danscape, a few more slides from you.
Yeah, so I think these next couple of charts just show the same pattern across different stats. So not only were teams getting more shots on target against us, they were getting closer to goal against us as well. On that chart, and if you just skip to the next one, I think it's similar for.
Well, yeah, because I was going to say, wasn't there quite a lot of matches where we were seeing pretty high numbers of passes in the box and touches in the box? I remember you bringing that up during the season. Yeah, it seemed like it just got more and more prevalent as the season.
There was a big shift, and I suppose Paul Morley's theory has always been through this season about the time between games and the rest time, and us having more rest time than other teams, and maybe that is a real factor, because this is when the cup games started coming thick and fast. And maybe it was those extra games that have really had that impact on us. So, again, this chart is the XG against obviously we sort of held that quite well through the season, unfortunately, until those last few games where we kind of dropped down again there on that chart. Skip on. But what did stay consistent and actually got better, and I haven't gone into much depth with Matt Sells in this because, you know, we know he had a brilliant season. There's not too much to say. But as we started allowing more shots on our goal, his chart went the other way. He got better and his save rate went up. So we have got a massive amount to certainly thank him for in terms of keeping us, you know, in that mix and not dropping down any further than we kind of did for whatever reason.
We will have a goalkeeper chat, not today, but on a forthcoming episode. We will get into the goalkeepers for sure. Okay, so that's a little bit of an overview that you've given us. Now you're going to move on to playing time and the squad in general.
Yeah. So yeah, flick into the first one. So just comparing how many defenders we used versus how many defenders other teams in the league used. And we used 9, which was the same number as Newcastle, same number as Fulham, same number as West Ham. So it's not, you know, outrageous. We didn't try and do something completely different. But really the average line between the teams in that top half of the league, they use 10 different players in defence. This is just in the league through the season. So we could, I suppose there's teams that use, you know, 11, 12, but they're like some Man City and Chelsea who've got too many players. They've got to find something for them to do. So what we probably target, this is for a recruitment point of view, is we need that one more player to get us to 10 that's regularly contributing into the Premier League season. So that's the purpose of that chart there.
Yeah, I agree with what Anna's saying right here.
I'm myself on mute. I know I put myself on mute. Probably should stay on mute. I think the next season with the added Europa Conference League as well, we know that we're going to have to bring in players that can manage that load. So it's almost a question now of how many do we bring in? If we didn't have that competition, you might say, well, look, one extra gives us that uplift, but maybe it needs to be 2 or 3. So,
well, look at the teams. There's other teams in there, isn't there? Like Villa, for example, who used 11. So maybe you need that extra one. This is just in defence, obviously. So maybe you do need that extra defender as well that you're going to use.
Yeah. Okay. Minutes played.
Yeah. So this just shows, obviously, that, you know, these are the 4 players that played most minutes. Everyone kind of knows that in Milenkovic, Murillo, Aina, and Williams. But you can see that they make up more than 3/4 of that chart. As you go around it, and the other players were kind of a bit part in comparison to that. So just to sort of illustrate, obviously, Willy Bolly only got his 150 minutes throughout the season, unfortunately.
Exceptional 150 minutes.
That's right.
150 minutes. But no, I think the key here of what we just said is, if you could imagine that Alex Moreno slice is bigger and you actually have a more equal spread of a third with Ola, Nico, and whoever this new fullback is coming in. And the magic sauce is Ola can play both sides, Nico can play both sides. So you can just rotate them around and you have 3 fullbacks that have equal minutes through the whole season. And it's the fullbacks that are the ones that get beasted in terms of cardio, of running up and down the entire time. Love the stat about Murillo walks the 3rd most in the whole of the league, or whatever it was that came out on the PVC. But yeah, I think that's the key. And you're having a 3rd person out. Moreno, was it the fact that he was tied and we'd have to sign him if he played a certain number of minutes? Like if it got to 1,000, for example, or something like that, we're going to have to buy him. There was something in the background where he was playing and then suddenly he wasn't.
Clearly was. There must have been. I'm just going to interrupt ourselves because with injuries, that's always an area where you just don't know what's going to happen. And Nico Williams has been on international duty. The club have put a statement out, and we all saw Nico getting carried off on Friday night for Wales. They're saying that they can confirm that Nico Williams has returned from international duty due to an ankle injury sustained in that Wales game. The club will continue to assess Nico upon his return. And Nico put out a message himself talking about being gutted about getting injured and that he's planning on being back for pre-season, which that in itself kind of says, you know, it's probably not that serious. The reason why I mention it now is that it only takes one of your key players to do their anterior cruciate ligament or something else, and so on and so on and so on. So, you know, we had Harry Toffolo up our sleeve, but he was used sparingly. I mean, look, you know, I love Toff like everybody does, and he made a great clearance against Spurs off the line. You know, but that's not going to be enough, is it? You need someone coming in who you can lean on to play a lot of minutes. Hey, Richard.
And I think, yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say too, I think Raf's talked about this quite a bit during the season, which is that the work rate that has to go into when you play that position, because especially if you're Nico, because if he's playing on the left-hand side, which he was, and he was dominating that side of the ball, Dan and I have touched on this in multiple episodes where we talked about, the stats from an attacking standpoint, from a percentage of attacking. We were like at 40+% on the left-hand side. So he's got to do it even more. So it's a miracle that he didn't get injured, because that guy is having to play more of an advanced role. And he definitely seemed like he was doing more advanced work in terms of the offensive side of the plan. And then having to get back and play some of the best wingers in football and hold that position. And so, yeah, it just speaks to the fact, like Raf mentioned, if you have that sort of 3-man rotation, and then you give the opportunity that maybe balance out the attacking as well, in terms of not just being so reliant on one side of the pitch as heavily as we were. Because I think it was like something like 8 to 10% higher on the left-hand side versus the right. So it just put a lot of stress on Nico. I think he's a young guy, he's a brilliant guy, he's a great athlete, but still, that's a lot to ask of one guy so consistently.
That pie chart, Dan, that's on the screen, for those that can't see it, shows all the minutes played, and the ones that stand out as the bulky ones are effectively the first choice back four: Milenkovic, Murillo, Williams, and Aina. So they've obviously, between them four, as being as ever present as we possibly could have them. I don't know if you've looked at this, Dan, but how does that stack up to other Premier League teams?
Next slide. We're dwelling on this one. Next slide. It's all here. So, number of defenders used for more than 70% of the minutes in the season. And you can see that we've used 4 players over 70% of the minutes, which is the 4 players that, the solid standard backline that you just mentioned. But that's not abnormal, because Liverpool did exactly the same. Arsenal did exactly the same. The teams with the best defenses tend to have a settled back four that play pretty much, as many games as they can. Bournemouth the same, Palace the same, all teams that have done well defensively. So it's not so much that you want to necessarily rotate your main 4 defenders that often. It's just having obviously a backup, so that the 5 games that they do miss, you've got someone good enough to come in and do it. The teams that have only used 1 defender for more than 70% of the minutes this season is Man City, Villa, and Spurs, and none of their defenses did particularly well this season. So you don't want to rotate that much. But it's a case that, maybe you've got that one other player that brings you down to just having 3 players that you use that much. Again, okay. One player is what it suggests to me that we need. And this is the win rate for the defenders when they've played at least 30 minutes in a game. And I suppose it's covering the whole squad. Danilo jumps up nicely at the start there, which is purely down to the fact he didn't play that many games, I guess. But Morato is the one that stands out here. So it's just re-emphasizing the impact Morato had, is that when he played at least half an hour in a game, actually, we did all right. He's got a 60% win rate when he was on the pitch for more than half an hour, which is not necessarily how he ended the season in people's eyes, but, he did okay when he was asked to do it. And so it's just to sort of see how he rated in there, because he didn't play many full games for that one. And then this is starting to get into the deeper stats. So this is the number of defensive actions that each of the defenders complete per 90 minutes on average across the season. So you see Moreno, Morato, Murillo, Williams, Milenkovic, and Aina. So actually, when he was on the pitch, Morato had to do the most defending per minute, if you like, when he came onto the field. That's because he was usually brought on to shut up shop. Murillo next in line. So as a consistent performer, Murillo did 16 defensive actions a game, which would be clearances, tackles, blocks, and so on. Nico Williams just behind Murillo. Alex Moreno just behind Nico Williams. Obviously didn't play that many games. Ola Aina then the lowest of the lowest of the fullbacks, if you like, on the right hand side, and then Milenkovic down at the bottom, who is clearly just the guy who scares people off without actually getting involved based on this stats.
Ultimate delegation. Delegation
right.
In the back.
Just looks scary, and you don't have to make as many tackles. So he's down at like 12. So he's doing 12 defensive actions a game versus Murillo doing 16.
I'd love to just highlight here, Dan. Like, Nico was hammered about a season ago for not being good defensive enough. kind of like a Trent level of hammering for not being able to
Well,
defend.
don't
Great
get too
going
much
forward.
into specific players here, because we've got the specific players section coming up. as
Okay,
well.
cool.
So,
But I'd like to say early indications is the fact that Nico is showing the fact that he is actually very good at defending and does a lot of it.
And here we
He
are,
does a
player
lot of it.
performance.
Yeah.
Defense only. Off we go.
Yeah. So this is how our defenders performed in terms of scoring goals. Very high up, fourth most goals from a defensive unit in the league, which is mostly thanks to Milenkovic. Obviously, Murillo chipped in with a couple, Aina with a couple, Williams got his one, which means that we had a very good goal conversion rate from our defenders, which is kind of a standout season in that respect. It'd be good if we could have that every year, set pieces, impact, and taking chances. But where it dips down on the right-hand side is what we'll come on to and what Rich has touched on in terms of that attacking impact generally from our defenders. So in terms of touches in the attacking third, which is the third column from the right, that's probably the most interesting comparison in that, there's 17 other teams whose defenders have more touches in that attacking third than we do. So we were very much a sit-at-home kind of defensive unit for a lot of the time. And we didn't see our fullbacks bomb on as much as most of the teams do in the Premier League, which is one that sort of stands out, which means in the end that they've contributed less on all the attacking stats, if you like, than other teams. So they rank third from bottom there. And the teams below is like Everton, who are the ultimate defensive team. And
do you think that's a philosophical or sort of tactical choice by Nuno, Dan? Because I think I remember you saying this at one point in the season too. It's just a difference in terms of how we're leveraging those fullbacks to play more wing back role. It felt like some of the defensive prowess that we were seeing early in the season was due to the fact that we were staying in that low block and we were keeping those guys at a much further distance from the opposing box. It's just an interesting change, I think, or from what we're used to. I think. Maybe under Cooper.
Yeah, I was going to say definitely. I think Cooper likes to let his fullbacks bomb on, doesn't he? I think that's what Leicester were doing even when he was there. I think that is a big difference. I think Nuno's definitely defense first for fullbacks, and then only if the game sort of needs it do you bomb on. I think.
Yeah, there's an air of caution here. I think if you look at that attacking third, you've got Southampton that are fourth in that chart, and that's worked out really well for them. And then you think to like Brighton, who you imagine that they have, like they want Curbano like massively because he fits their whole raiding fullback situation. They're only coming in at 12th with their defenders getting forward. And they're like, I don't know. And this is where, there's the kind of the perception versus stats. And I always think it's an interesting kind of blend between the two for expectation from the eye test and then what the data actually tells you.
Okay, let's have a look at the next slide.
So yeah, we're going to start getting into some of these player profiles to start looking at the players. So rather than look at specific stats too much and say, non-penalty XG, this and the other, try to group it into profiles that describe the kind of players and the kind of things they're doing on the pitch. The one that's of particular interest to most people is probably the shithousery second line there.
Where do you think you're going, shithouse?
So that's an example of what I'm trying to do. So that's, a player that does the most fouls, gets the most yellow cards, gets fouled the most themselves. That's, group that all together, and that's the S-housery.
Shithouse! Shithouse! Shithouse!
You can't put a metric like shithouse in and expect me not to take the absolute most I can out of it.
Yeah, go for it. There'll be opportunities coming up.
Please carry on.
The ones highlighted yellow are kind of the key defensive ones. So that's box defending, dueling, and proactive defending. So box defending is more aerial, more clearances. Proactive defending is more getting out, tackling people, tackling a bit higher up the pitch. So that's just to give you a bit of background before we start talking about these things coming up.
There's always one moment, right, when that happens.
You know me, Dr.
At least one.
I'm always there for that moment. Right, where we go? Next slide. Oh yes, right. Defenders' skill sets.
So once you've got those kind of profiles, you could look through and compare teams for again just the defensive unit where their strengths lie. So Forest are top left, and you can see that our defensive units' strengths lie in defending the box, in dueling, winning duels, in kind of being anchored and disciplined, in being quite direct, as in playing long balls and crosses into the box quite early. Where we're kind of on the lower end of the chart is the pressing, which we mentioned already. but also progressive passing. Like we from a defensive unit point of view, we've not tended to pass out from the back as much of a distance as other teams manage to do. So we either leave that to other players, or we just obviously to some extent don't have the ball as much as other teams. So then what I've done is just compare that to a few similar-ish teams so that you can see how no team is actually that similar to each other. Like, for example, Palace compared to Bournemouth, the chart is very different. Like, it's almost the reverse of each other in that Bournemouth are very much all about pressing, carrying the ball and kind of creativity from the defence. Palace are very direct by comparison. They don't tend to carry the ball from defence as much. It tends to be more long balls and stuff. But again, they're still very good at the dueling side of it. And then Newcastle's kind of a hybrid of all of them, really. So it's just, again, to reinforce what, to some extent, we know is that we were quite a low block sort of team that did most of our defending in that back part of the pitch. And we didn't try and overplay.
Oh, well, Bournemouth shithousery excellence.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say, I bet Everton's on the top of that list.
Yeah, well, they've all been sold and scattered amongst the far corners of Europe. So that shithousery has been now disseminated into Europe.
It's true.
Centre-backs, here we go.
Yeah, so centre-backs by the same sort of profile. So just diving into Milenkovic on the left and Murillo on the right. So again, it's just emphasising how much Milenkovic is that kind of old school sort of defender, good at box defending, good at duelling, very good disciplinary record, not a shithouser on here, insofar as not getting booked that often and that kind of thing. But what he's not doing is ball carrying. He's not overlapping the play. He's not dribbling, obviously. He's not really adding creativity. He's more of a box impact. But what I thought was interesting is the kind of pinky purple line is what he did at Fiorentina the last season before. And actually, he was much more involved in progressive passing and ball carrying there, which does start to point towards the Nuno style, or the style that he's picked for this particular set of players, in that he was more proactive on the ball and off the ball than he has been in this performance. Or it's the difference between the style of leagues.
Yeah, maybe I was going to ask, like, how much is that attributed to because I know that Serie A is often spoken of as more physical, tactical, defensive oriented, right? So that was kind of interesting when I saw that slide. I was like, wow, that's amazing that he was a little bit more involved with the actual like progressive, getting the ball at the pitch and doing a little bit more with his ball at his feet than he did in the Premier League. I mean, I can imagine the quality of the players in the Premier League is quite a bit different in terms of speed and
slower build-up in Italian football, isn't it? So the centre-backs will be brought into play with that more
time, have more time to,
Okay.
On
the right-hand side is Murillo's chart, which I think the main thing just to quickly pick out on that is how much his kind of box defending stats did improve this season. You can see he's jumped up kind of 2 percentiles, so 20% higher up that chart, which was absolutely crucial for our style of play.
And his duelling as well.
And his duelling as well, yeah. So massive progression from him. And you can see he's that more all-round centre-back. He will do a bit of everything on that chart.
Okay, excellent.
I won't go into too much on these. This is the sort of detail behind it, but I suppose just to keep moving through. The only one that, I suppose there's not too much to say. It kind of just reinforces what's on the previous chart in that Milenkovic tends to be a specialist in one area, and Murillo tends to be the defender that's obviously going to do the proactive defending. He's going to also do the box defending, and in terms of attacking play and touches and things like that, he's the guy who's going to get on the ball. That one. So then just looking into some of the other centre-backs that didn't get as many minutes in the background, Morato on the left compared to Niakate from last season, I suppose just as a similar-ish replacement role. And you can see Morato massively high on the old shithousery score for coming on and getting yellow cards and stuff and doing all that fun stuff. But he was a very proactive defender, which I think is interesting. Not in any way really like Milenkovic, but more like Murillo, but at an extreme level in terms of how much he just goes out and tries to win tackles. But he didn't get involved at all creatively or on the ball or anything like that because of the nature of when he came on the game. And on the right, of course, Big Willy Bolly, compared to...
This has got to be your favourite chart.
This is
the fact
the
that Milenkovic, player of the season, he's the second coming. And here, Willy Bolly is better than him in every single way, with the exception of discipline.
Apart from Willy Bolly's more of a shithouse, basically.
Yeah.
On this chart.
But he basically beats him at absolutely everything else.
I think this is from last season, and in terms of the fact he's just more proactive. That again, it might come down to manager style and what he wants the defenders to do this time. But you would see Bolly going out and engaging players quite high up the pitch, and occasionally they get around him and all that. Rather than just sitting in and kind of holding that defensive line. But yeah, I do love that chart. So let's keep that on screen.
I've got so much I want to say, but we're going to move on. Okay, so player profile still Morato against Murillo and so on.
Yeah, so comparing Morato and Murillo, I suppose the more interesting one on the right is Omar Bamadeli compared to Jair Cunha or Paula, depending on which name he wants to use, who might be coming in potentially, 19-year-old. And you can see based on the numbers on the right that Jair Cunha seems to have had a better start to life, played a few more minutes than Omar Bamadeli, and seems to be ticking more of the boxes on these profiles than Omar Bamadeli did in the Premier League for us last season. So from a point of view of potentially getting an upgrade in that position, if Omar Bamadeli moves on, then it looks like we might be getting that on that one.
Cool.
Okay, cool.
And then bigger picture, obviously this is where the stats come in for me, because eye test versus stats is all good for the games you can see, but obviously you just cannot watch every player for every minute in every game. So this is where the stats come in to allow you to compare between these and the players that you don't see play week in, week out. And you get a comparison here of Murillo and Huijsen on the left as centre backs, and Milenkovic and Tarkowski on the right as centre backs. Similar profile of players, talked about in similar kind of context, and you can just see that it's very similar, Murillo and Huijsen, but from a point of view of possession-based play, he's actually does dominate the chart there in terms of his progressive passing and ball carrying and his proactive defending, even over Murillo, who's had a brilliant season. So it might point again to team style of play, but it also points again to the fact that Murillo can still do more from a point of view of turning into that style of defender that a Real Madrid or a Man City or whatever might come and try and take off our hands. And Milenkovic versus Tarkowski on the right. Again, Tarkowski is the archetypal sort of Premier League defender now for that similar role. He goes out, he wins headers, he marshals the box, he sits kind of deep. But again, he does do a bit more than Milenkovic did this season. He's been on the ball more progressive, more proactive defending, again, on the kind of bottom right of that chart, and more shithousery as well. So again, there's still areas whereby, it's possible to be that boxed style of defender and then still add a little bit more to his game, potentially, in terms of getting on the ball.
And then the fullbacks, we're going to whiz through this before we go into a break. So take us through this, Dan.
Yeah, fullbacks. So Ola Aina comparing his last season to this season, you can see, broadly speaking, he's actually performed less of these defensive actions this season than last season on that chart. So whether that tells you much, I don't know. Again, it might tell you just as a team we didn't have to do as much defending, but he also did less ball carrying, less overlapping, less dribbling, less creative this season than last season, which might surprise you from the eye test. Nico Williams, on the other hand, the green line being this season, more rounded performance. I think he's probably the most shithousing defender we've got based on these charts, and he was even more of that last season than this season. But again, his attacking impact has gone up this season, which is good to see. Better box defending massively. Sorry. Just to point out, this isn't last season. This is Nico Williams' first season for us in the Premier League. I did that deliberately to show his full progression of where he's come from to where he is now. So box defending wise, it's massively gone up, like 3 or 4 percentiles up. Attacking play a couple of percentiles up, and his dueling's gone up a couple of percentiles as well. So again, a massive improvement from Williams and where he was, which I think the eye test
discipline's improved massively over those 2 years as
well. Yeah. On the left, Williams and Moreno, actually quite similar profiles. Moreno just adding a little bit more attacking play in the numbers. And then on the right, Moreno versus Toffolo to show, kind of that Toffolo's time potentially up here, but, Moreno probably offered a bit more than him overall as a player, even though neither of them had that many minutes to show what they were doing. But again, Nico Williams, the most complete fullback out of those 3 options that we had at left back, certainly, across those charts.
Interesting, Dan. You to go the whole perception versus stats. I actually think that Moreno-Williams chart is exactly where perception meets stats. We know that Moreno is designed to go forward slightly more and would be better than Nico, but we know he's not as good as defence. And on balance, Nico is incrementally better at defence than Moreno is better at attacking than Nico, and that's why he was picked. I think that really sums it up really well.
Yeah.
Okay. Last couple.
Yeah. So this is showing like the detail behind that. So from a point of view of the final third involvement on the bottom right is probably the most interesting one. This is between Nico Williams in green and Einar in pinky purple, and you can just see that although Einar he's an attacking fullback, his kind of percentage of touches in the final third, his ability to get on the end of progressive passes, carry the ball into the box, touches in the attacking penalty area, some way down on the impact that Williams managed to have when he settled into the team there. So again, there's potentially more that you would ask for Ola Einar, given how good he is on the ball. But also, obviously, it depends which side of the pitch you choose to attack.
I was going to say, I'm going to come to Ola's defence here a bit, and this is where the eye test does kick in for the stats to explain the stats. The amount of times where Ola has been rampaging forward and there is no one in front of him because Alanga has floated into the middle or double teaming on the left-hand side, and he's just had to stop running and then just do something else because he's got no one to play a 1-2 with and then overlap on the outside. So I don't think it's really all down to Ola.
Okay.
You skip that one. That was left in an error.
Okay. We'll take that off for the moment. Okay. So we're just going to take a quick break. There's a lot to digest. And obviously, we have the ultimate stats man with us, and that's what he does. And that's why he's here. So Dan, brilliant work as ever so far. Really kind of gives everyone watching a real look at the metrics of our players as well. And the Grand Madness says Nico was his vote for player of the season. Nothing that he's seen on the analysis from you so far has made him change his mind. And, listen, we could argue the whys and wherefores of stats and context and all that kind of stuff. But I think what we can safely say is Nico has developed really, really well. And so he's a very, very important player for us. Quick break, guys.
The Cheese Trader, based on Grape Lane in York, is a cheese lover's paradise. Home to some wonderful specialty cheeses, relishes and chutneys, and also with a fantastic street food menu. Try their loaded fries or posh cheese on toast. It'll be the best you've ever had. Owned by Forest fan Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader proudly sponsors Talking Reds. Quote Talking Reds every time to get 10% off your order. The Cheese Trader and Talking Reds, the perfect cheesy mix.
Do check out Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader. All the links are in the bio. Over 100 of you in the live with us, which is amazing. Thank you so much. Please do like and subscribe. Hit follow. Whatever button it is that you want to press, then please go ahead and press it. And we'll move on to having a chat about maybe one or two defensive reinforcements. Now, it's very speculative. This is very speculative. We've picked out a few players that we like, that we think might be good for us. We know they've been dipping into the Brazilian market, and it looks like the three Botafogo boys are on the way. I think Brighton are trying to hijack one of them. So we'll see what happens there. So Richard's going to come into play with this as well on the defensive reinforcements when we look at the likes of Nico Williams against one or two others. So Richard Spray, over to you.
Yeah, so in the spirit of what Dan's talked about in relation to how we are playing from a fullback to wingback sort of perspective, looking at some of the young players out there in the more competitive leagues like these two guys, one of which plays in the Bundesliga, that's Nathaniel Brown on the left, and then Adrian Truffert, who we have, I think, been linked with at one point, sort of towards the end of the season, beginning of the off season, but they're both very similar. As the graphs point out here, you see the numbers in relation to Nico Williams. We're looking at those in comparison. So taking Nathaniel Brown, comparing him to Nico Williams. Now, granted, I did purposely try to fulfill a wish from one Daniel Cook, which is to have a true left-footed left back. And so both these guys are true left-footed left backs, which is great. Both very young. Truffaut's 22. He'll be 23 relatively soon. Nathaniel Brown's at 21, who's also playing for the under-21 Germany squad. Again, different profile in the sense that they start to sort of move the needle more towards what we would have expected from an Alex Moreno in terms of how he's going to operate on that left-hand side. So in looking at how Nathaniel Brown is going to work from a stylistic standpoint, he's quick, agile. I mean, one of the things I love about Ola Aina is that short area quickness, right? That ability to cut, move, and weave around very fluidly. Nathaniel Brown's very similar in that standpoint. It's basically like looking at Alex Moreno, but younger with a little bit higher ceiling. And so I love the idea that we maybe are going to employ someone who, we never know what's going to happen with these players. As we've all long said, there's going to be this situation where we try to move towards the Brighton model where we have players coming in that maybe right away aren't going to be dominating the amount of minutes they're going to play. But because of their age profile, because of their talent level and potential ceiling, you might want to prepare them for when, say, someone like Ola, if we have to, moves on, and you move Nico over to the right, or you have a situation where maybe Nico just needs spelling, or you have a tactical change because you think the opposing team who we're going to face is going to require a little bit more rotting on that left-hand side. He does have 3 goals and 6 assists, Nathaniel Brown, and he's doing this as I said, in the Bundesliga, which is a very competitive league. And so I like the idea that he might contribute a little bit more on that side of the ball. So
Rich,
go ahead.
I would say as well, I think age is a bit of a factor here. And if you think that those stats that were really good by Dan were showing Nico from 2 seasons ago, which is when he was 21, to now, and you think where Nico was. Now, the box defending is a little bit worrying for me, that is a massive gap. And Nico's baseline 2 years ago was better than that in terms of his box defending, but his all-roundness is not too dissimilar, and he's actually better from a going forward perspective in that same timeline. I also think Trufer is already now pretty much spoken for in the last couple of days, and I think he's going elsewhere. So
yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, and we're not talking about someone that I think is a direct replacement of Nico in the sense that he's going to provide. They might provide immediately all the same defensive skill sets, but they might develop over time into things like that. As you mentioned with Nico, he obviously had a different player profile too. I mean, he's playing at an international level at a young age. He's coming through a Liverpool academy up against players that probably now are, they're in these leagues and they're playing professionally at the highest levels. And so he's definitely his path has been different, right? Than potentially Nathaniel Brown's. But in terms of looking at an alternative to the kinds of things that we see with Nico, not significantly deficient on the offensive side, but he's definitely holding down that defensive side, as you mentioned, in terms of discipline, in terms of box defending, in terms of dueling, all of the stats that Dan just referenced. I just like looking at a slightly different profile player that we could deploy, because Kubiano is, again, similar in that way, right? He's more advancing up the pitch and more progressive up the pitch and doing a little bit more in the opposing third. Yep, Zalewski, this is... Yeah, go ahead, Greg. Do you want to jump in on?
No, not at all. I was just moving you on. So
appreciate that.
Another couple of fullbacks. Nikola Zalewski, who is the Polish international. He is a Roma player, was on loan at Inter Milan, came on the Champions League final. He's born and raised in Italy, in fact, of Polish parents. He's a player that I wanted to kind of have on this because I've liked him for a while. I think he's very progressive. He's
maximum shithousery.
Yeah.
Well,
Where do you think you're going, shithouse?
that's why I like him. He is, but his ball. I like him for his ball carrying. I mean, that is really strong. He can play either side, but will play on the left, I think, mainly. And his overlapping, his overall kind of forward play is very good. Again, he's 23 years old, so box defending isn't as strong as Nico's is now, certainly from this season or from last season. So, whether or not we could say that he would be a like-for-like replacement, or maybe not a replacement so much, but an addition, someone to come in. I like his profile. He's not the kind of player that I don't think he is a player we would sign. I think there is an option to buy for Milan from Roma. There might be an obligation to buy, in fact. But I just thought his profile seemed like it might suit us as well.
Can I ask a question about the stats and the basis of the stats, for not just for me, but for anyone listening, because it's a question for me too, is when we've got these and where the data's from, are we comparing apples with apples here, or is it in the individual leagues where they are ranked? So we're ranking between leagues.
So the way I've done it is the Premier League I've done on its own, and then the other big 4 leagues I've grouped together. So Serie A, Bundesliga, League 1 they're all grouped together as a percentile, and the Premier League stuff separate, which I think works in terms of style of leagues and stuff like that. So you can see
it's vaguely equitable. We're comparing vaguely apples with apples.
I think it's as close as it's going to get for the purposes of all this. One player that I don't or haven't really looked at too much, but I know does make one or two ears prick up is Vanderson, Richard, another Brazilian.
Yeah, and he's got a very sort of Brazilian way about him in terms of his on-the-ball skills. I mean, if you watch the highlights of him, and we're talking outside the statistics, he's just a very, you see the ball-carrying stats here in comparison to Nico. It's higher. You see the overlapping, higher dribbling, higher creativity, higher attacking, higher. But similar to what was being spoken of as it relates to Nathaniel Brown, which one other thing I want to throw in here before we move on with Vanderson is that all of these players are roughly in and around 13 to about 18 million in terms of their market value. So we're talking about a very good price point for, burgeoning talent. Exactly, that we are trying to potentially flip at some point. Because if we are able to take the kind of influence that we've seen Nuno have on our current defensive team and be able to, elevate their game a little bit and help them continue to progress, especially in a more competitive league like the Premier League. That means more opportunity for us in the future to continue, selling these players at a high value, considering where their ages are at. So, but yeah, Vanderson's a really exciting player. I mean, he plays on the right, he'll occasionally play on the left, but he's predominantly on the right-hand side. So just as an alternative look to, someone like Williams or someone like Ola Aina, because we don't, Ola hasn't signed his contract yet. We know we have him for another season. We'll see what happens. Greg and I have talked about that. We've all talked about, to a degree, what might happen with him. We have the luxury of having, if for any reason he moves on, to try to get higher wages at another club. The reality is we have Williams to shift over to the right, and then we have some options to play on the left, or we have another guy that potentially could be, you keep Williams on the left, and then you bring in another right back that's got a little bit more to him in terms of his ability to press and to create more disruption and havoc on the offensive side of our play. So he's a Brazilian international. He's played, I think he's got 6 caps for Brazil, or 6 appearances rather. So he is on the radar for Brazil. He's 23 years old, still a young guy, but also playing in Ligue 1. So he's playing against competitive. He's in a competitive league, and I just love the idea that he has proactive defending too, and that's replete on all the highlights. You see him engaging people pretty regularly, and his S-housery is actually right around Nico. So that means even when he engages, he doesn't get that many yellow cards, or at least he's not.
Yeah, that's for sure.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, he definitely needs more discipline. He needs to kind of improve that aspect of his game. He needs to improve the box defending side of his game as well, similar to what we just talked about with Nathaniel Brown, but still a very talented player that
I think all these players you've shown all need better discipline, but the fact that his proactive defending is basically elite, it's like top percentile, and his dueling is with Nico already. I think he's probably the most exciting out of the lot if we can then just tune up his defending. We've managed to do it with Nico.
Indeed.
Yeah, moving on to this slide. That's the slide that's on the screen at the moment. I mean, that proactive defending stat that has Vanderson completely encircling
to anyone that's watching, is not watching and listening. The proactive defending chart for Vanderson is
dwarfing
percentile on every single stat that is there. It's the entire graph. It's amazing.
Tackles, interceptions, recoveries, tackling dribblers, and tackles in the midfield third, not just in the defensive third. Yeah,
absolutely phenomenal.
So this, I mean, to be honest with you, this isn't. Maybe it's just me. I've been busy. I've had my head elsewhere. But he's not a name that I must say I know a lot about. I'm not going to lie and sort of, oh yeah, he's great. But a lot of people will know of Vanderson. But why has no one picked him up then? What is he going to be moving? If we don't get him, is someone else going to get him? Because he looks on paper like he's the fucking bee's knees.
Yeah, because he's going to be the highest. Now, granted, in relation to other people we've seen, like if you tried to pay for Anthony Robinson right now, it'd be a ridiculous number, right? But if you look at him, I mean, you're right, Greg. I mean, I asked the same question. I know we're not talking about defenders in this way, but I asked the same thing about Gyökeres. Like, he's been languishing in FC Porto for some years now, and it's like, well, if this guy is as phenomenal with 39 goals and 37 matches or something of that nature, it's like, why the hell is this guy not playing in the Premier League already?
Can you,
I don't know if I can answer that question, but maybe Dan can answer that question. Or
well, can you guess? I've just Googled his name. Can you guess which team comes up as the first team that apparently one day ago are ready to bid 30 million euros for him?
Brighton.
No. Which team just likes to buy everybody at the minute?
Oh, Chelsea.
Chelsea?
No.
Man City.
Manchester United this time.
Man U.
Oh, of course. Why not?
And I suppose as a wing back, as a right
players-
wing back in a 3, then he looks like he's perfect for that.
He does look must. I mean, he's is he at Gremio? I think he's at Gremio. Or he was at
He's
Gremio.
at Monaco.
Oh, he's at Monaco now. Okay, I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
So he's in Europe already then. So that makes his value go up.
It's 4th season, I think.
Okay, see, yeah, that's how much I know. So if we were signing him directly from Brazil, he's going to be cheaper. If he's already in Europe at Monaco, the price is going to be up higher. What kind of market value have we got on this guy, Richard? Do we know? 30,
It's 20 to
40?
25
Okay.
In euros or pounds?
pounds.
Okay. What I would say is we do have a bit of a trump card when it comes to getting Brazilian nationals or speaking. We've got a Portuguese coach. We've got a whole handful of Brazilian players or Portuguese speaking players that are our club. They all evidently hang out together when you see all the socials and stuff like that. And they've built a nice community together. When you're coming over to have that is massive, especially if you're bringing family over as well. That's a huge, huge thing. And so I do think we've got a bit of an edge compared to other clubs now when it comes to Brazilians and Portuguese speaking.
I mean, if we are signing Kiribano and we have him on the left and we went after Vanderson and had him on the right, and then we'd have Murillo and Morato in the middle and maybe Jair Cunha as well. Douglas Luiz is on his way as well. Danilo's
starting back line of Brazil.
I mean, we are going to literally be, it will be not like watching Chuff in Brazil. We will be watching Brazil. I mean, I'll have to get the samba songs out again. Bloody hell. I mean, it's very exciting. But, I mean, Vanderson is a player that we're talking about now. There's been no links that Forest are after him. We should say that. We're just putting him into the mix as a player that we like because clearly his stats are really good. Time is really against us, guys. The end of the lecture is there. I wanted to say, you know what? I have to say, Danscape, I've said a lot of hard work goes into that. We're very lucky. Dan, you are the stat guru. Thank you. Really, thank you very much for that. Richard, you're scratching your itch on looking at players and players we might sign. And Raf, I need you now because we're going to start have a little bit of a finance and PSR chat. Let's get
very quickly.
Right. So quickly before we do. So let's say, for example, we want to sign one of these players that have got a market value out there. I think you said, Richard, between 13 and 18 million pounds for one of those kind of, you know, good players.
So, Greg, what I'm going to quickly do is anyone that didn't see last time, give you 30 seconds of where we are and where we left this last time.
Sure.
Just to kind of tie back to where we were. Okay. So very quickly in this chart, we've got all the players that we've got here. We know how much is still their book value they've got. We know the wages. It's all public data as best as possible. We know how much we get charged with amortization, all the financy stuff that's in the background. But what the sheet will tell us is if we sell them for a certain amount of money, how much profit do we get off the back of it next year in terms of not just the profit, but how much money do we save not paying them wages, not having amortization hit our charts, right? We've got the other side. When we buy players, if we know what the price is, the contract is, the wages, we can then figure out what's the annual charge that we get to our profit and loss account. You move the two up and down and it gives us a net figure. What we do know, though, as well, is that we've got a target. So this, we know what we've had for PSR for 22-23 and 23-24. So we know what the target is to just hit the line, and we're probably going to do that this year, just hitting the line for the financial year that ends the end of this month, at the end of June. If we just hit the line, we know what the line is going to be for next financial year. And that is about being able to make a loss of about 52.5 million, 52 and change, or whatever it might be. Now, there are other things that will move. We're going to have things like ticket pricing. We've got things like our new sponsorship contract. We're going to have some prize money from Europe that we didn't have before, but we're going to have more travel to pay for it and other things. But the main things that cost money in a football club are the players and paying them and buying and selling. So the sheet will effectively say, If we're paying people, then if we start selling them, how much are we saving? If we're buying them, how much cost is coming on? And this is the number that we need to look to next year. All things being equal, we might get some help, like I've said, with sponsorship, prize money, other things like that. But just from a player's perspective, if that's the thing that moves, how much over and under are we that £52 million loss, and how much room we've got? So this is in the sheet where we got to last time. So you'll see from the last episode, we've sold fringe players for what we thought was good, and we think that Danilo might be off. We also had Anthony Elanga in here. Now, before we do anything else as well, chaps, from what we've seen publicly from Anthony Elanga in one of a reputable newspaper, do we think Elanga's now staying? So do we need to take him out of the prospective sales?
I think so. I think it's really good when you get a player coming out and speaking like he did, because last season, when there were links, he wasn't quite as vocal as that, and he kind of left it up in the air a little bit. Now, it could be that he's saying what he's saying and saying, I'm very happy at Forest. They've took a chance on me. I'm comfortable. I'm loving my football. I want to stay. But it could well be that the club get a £55 million bid come in and they say, thank you very much, we're going to take the money. I think based on what he said and based on the fact that the club, I don't think want to sell him. They did want to sell him last season, and I certainly don't think they're going to want to sell him this season. I think we take him out and we say that Elanga's staying.
Right. So if Elanga goes, if he stays rather, and Morgan Gibbs-White is staying, so none of our big hitters. Basically, we've got Danilo, we've got Jota, and we've got Sosa, and then we've got just what is effectively the extra players that we need to move out. We're still probably in the range of about £20 million short, but that's because we've already plugged in a whole lot of players that we're buying. So let's now go over to Rich and Greg, like what you were saying. How do you want to modify where we were last time in terms of, let's focus on the defenders, and how do we want to move this around?
Just before
you got Brown in there. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, can I just clarify on the current squad? Have we moved out the likes of Obama Daly?
Yeah.
Have we moved out Richards?
Yep.
Have we moved out
Toffolo? I'll quickly go over for those listening.
Yeah,
got
please
Hennessy,
do that. Go over
Hennessy just leaving. Turner's being sold. Moreno, Bolly, Toffolo, and Panzo expired contracts. Richards gets sold. Omobamidele gets sold. O'Brien gets sold. Danilo gets sold. Dennis gets actually given away to someone for free just to get him gone. Bowler gets sold. Jota gets sold, and Sosa gets sold. That's where we are at the moment.
And we guesstimated rough values that we might get in a transfer value, as well as the wages released. So that's put us into our current position. Perfect.
Absolutely.
With that many players going out, although a lot of those were fringe and out on loan, there's gaps to fill in the squad. So, Richard, you were going to talk about Nathaniel Brown. Are you frozen? You still there?
Frozen a bit.
Oh, am I frozen?
It's
Richard. Yeah, are you okay? You were going to talk about Nathaniel Brown.
Yeah, I was going to say we've already included him, right? And I think we upped his current transfer market shows around 13, but I think we've increased that by a couple of £1 million. Right now, we've got him at 15. Jair's on there as well as an inclusion in terms of center back. I don't know if we would include anybody.
Cubano might be coming. I'm going to tell you right now, and I'm putting a bit of my neck on the line. If Danilo does not go to Lyon, Cubano's not coming to us.
Well,
I genuinely think.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. But is that just based on paper talk that you've seen?
No, I think it's the behind the scenes, the Marinakis and the Texter dealings.
When's the current deadline for this for the mini window to actually confirm it? So are any of those three going to get confirmed before then, do we think?
No, because they're all going to play for Botafogo in the Club World Cup.
Right.
And they're in the World Cup. Yeah, that's still going on for a while. So yeah.
So
right, should we just? So are you happy then? Jair, I'm very excited about, and I think if he comes, that's probably what he's going to be costing us, about 13 million quid, in the deal that's there. Nathaniel Brown seems about right at what 15 million quid.
Yeah.
And is he good? So is that at a level for our fullbacks? If we think the fact that we have Cubano and Brown Are those two good enough from the stats that we've seen and what you think, Rich, at a level that those can be the two that we have along with Ola and Nico, and we are good enough?
I would say so, because you're also factoring in a contingency plan in case we end up selling one of those other two.
Then I think we need a third. We're going to.
Yeah, I think if we're keeping Ola and Nico, then we have to add two to go with those. If we're losing, let's say it's Ola, because the only way we're going to lose Ola is if he doesn't agree to a long-term deal, in which case the club might as well sell him. They've activated the 1 year, and if they're going to sell him and get some money, then maybe they sell him. But they need to add two. So Cubano and another fullback needs to come in. Don't forget, Carmo is coming back to the club, and we've got Bindon coming to the club.
They're all centre backs.
I know that, but I'm just thinking about the defence as a whole in terms of what we need to buy for our defence.
Is Brown left back?
He's a left back.
So would we sign 2 left backs in that scenario, and then would that make sense?
Well,
Cubano's left, isn't he?
Yeah,
yeah.
And then you're losing all your box defending on the left if you don't play Nico and Einar anyway. But then you've bought.
And say you're probably better off bringing in Vanderson.
Well, yeah.
All right, okay.
no brainer.
So if we put a Vanderson in, what does a Vanderson cost
30,
us?
Well, 25.
I'm saying 25 to 30 probably. He's getting his numbers.
So let's split it and say 27. And then you're definitely putting him on a 5-year contract, aren't you? What's his wages, do you think, are going to be? If we think that when they usually come in, I think
Murillo
from Monaco was on about 40 or something when he came in.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be loads, coming from Monaco now at this age. And
he's at 50. He's at close to 50 right now.
So he's going to have to come in on something like 55 if we're going to get him across. Okay. So Jair, I think we've got in. We've got Vanderson and we're keeping Cubano. And that, I think, if we've got Bindon, we're still pretty okay then. If those come in, that is a good... Or is it Vanderson left-sided as well, though?
No, he's right.
No.
He's right-sided. So that gives the balance between all the positions.
So what does that do for us financially?
So if we do that, although we've got some punchy buys in here, like...
I was going to say, I'm not sure we'll buy Visser, Jesus, Kang, Diao, and keep Hudson-Odoi and Elanga. That would be bold.
But, okay, so we will need to sell. We are kind of 23 short next season. Although saying that, we do have bits like, there are bits that we really, we're not going to get very much for sponsorship and other things like that.
Might still be in Europa. You never know.
We might
get an extra 20 million boost there from somewhere.
So again, we can revisit this, but what we can see is that at the moment, what we cannot do, which people are saying is getting really excited by buying lots of players and players coming in. We've sold, I'm not going to use the word deadwood, but the periphery players that are there. We've taken out our 2 backup wingers and probably Danilo's going. But as you can see, that probably doesn't cut it.
I don't think you'd sign Kang and have Elanga and Hudson-Odoi.
And I don't think you'd sign De Ketelaere either with Morgan staying.
You'd sign a more development
so these
winger
come out
again.
So if we need a winger, we do need a winger. Is Diao enough to really be at the Elanga level?
I think, to be honest with you, we don't necessarily even need to put names on it. We need to look at how many people we need in the squad, how many signings we need to make, and we need to make us signing in the wing position. We know we need 2 more wingers, so 2 more wingers are going to cost us X amount, aren't they? No matter who they are.
No, it depends how good they are. So it's tier level of how good they are and what they're coming in.
But we have to
coming in, and we've got an Elanga. And we've got a Callum Hudson-Odoi. The issue that we've got is we do not have a third winger that is as good as them that we can rotate the wingers with and not have a drop-off, I would say.
This could fill that role, though, is what I'm saying, on that list, on the right at least.
Maybe even
Visser can go in. Okay. So then you're saying that actually if we keep them, we keep Visser as a 1, and this can drop down to a 2 tier.
Yeah. I don't think you signed roughly.
So we don't know who that would be, but they wouldn't cost us 40 million quid. That would cost us 25?
That's the next scouting episode to find a winger.
Well, that's it. Okay. That's what I'm trying to say. So we know we need to get a certain tier of winger who's going to cost us a certain amount of money. We don't know the name.
25 mil. Drop that down. We're getting closer. But again, we'll come on to wingers. but let's see where we are. And maybe this has got to drop down, but maybe we'll get some news about selling some players. So we'll do that. The last thing I just really quickly wanted to say, because I'm very awareness of time, is what we're doing, though, is focusing on next year. But there's a larger question that we'll come onto in the future, which is about how we move to be a sustainable club and not a selling club every single year. Because at the core of it, we actually make quite a large loss every single year. We are allowed to, as I'm sure many of you know, nearly all of you know, that we can make £105 million of losses over a 3-year period for the PSR system, which is still in place and may still be in place for a little while they try and get the new rules sorted out and approved. But if you break that down, that's rough. That is £35 million a year. The issue we've got with the movements that we've got here of taking out players and adding in better players potentially on higher wages is we are running an annual loss of the core unless we improve our stadium, unless we improve our sponsorship, unless we improve constant prize money that's coming in from Europe at about 100 million quid every single year that we're losing. So for a sustainability perspective, we are going to have to sell some, like Brighton do, a large player every single financial year and some change to get us back to the realms of about 30 to 40 million pound loss for PSR every single year. So that's the other question that we've got in the background.
Yeah. Okay, right. Thank you very much, Raf. Thank you so much for everyone being with us on this live. We've been going out on YouTube and on X. Lots of people have been watching. Please do hit like and subscribe. It does us a real favor to get our numbers up, as I always say. We're on X, we're on TikTok, we're on Facebook and Instagram and all the other places as well. I hope you've enjoyed the deep dive. These chaps put a lot of effort into the stats and the work and the graphs. So I really hope you appreciate them. We'll be back hopefully soon with another episode, a deep dive into the midfield, probably coming next. Not sure when that will be. We'll keep you posted. Raf and Danscape, thank you very much. You two are legends. Richard Spray, final word for you.
Not much. Just again, thoughts with the Wicklows, and just keep them, in your prayers if that's your proclivity or anything else, and just good vibes for them. And it seems like things are progressing. We just really appreciate them. Adam's a tremendous guy. Haven't had the privilege of talking with his wife, but by what Chris Elmer's told me, they're just quality human beings, and we just really appreciate them and all that they're doing. And hopefully that charity match went well that Greg talked about earlier. So.
I've been on social media. It sounds like it was a really good day. I've just been looking at a few comments. So, we'll catch up with that. What I would say, a couple of things as well. Hopefully, it looks like Alanga will stay. It's good when a player does come out and speak so warmly about the club. But ultimately, following on from what Raf was just saying, don't be too surprised if Forest do have to let go one of our jewels in the crown. I mean, that is ultimately where Forest are at the moment. And let's not forget that. It could be that we find ourselves in the Europa League next season, and that kind of conversation is being ramped up all over the place. And I feel for the Crystal Palace fans because they are a pretty good bunch, to be fair. And that FA Cup final win for them was a great day for them. And it probably was a good day for football. But ultimately, the rules are the rules. And if it means that sadly they can't take part because there are rules in place, and it's us that step up into their place, it's just the way, unfortunately, the world works. So I'm feeling a little bit for them, but ultimately, as you know, Forest come first, and if we benefit, so be it.
You don't sound like you are.
Whether we're in home or away or any other time, opinion and healthy debate with news and stats all reporting that no Forest play. Come join Greg and Richard right here on Talking.